A short distance and a few degrees of daylight later, he heard a vehicle approaching from behind. Training and preservation instinct made him want to leap into the ditch and hide till it passed. Instead, he turned boldly and looked at the vehicle as it drew closer, painting what he hoped was a trustworthy aspect to his visage. Apparently, it worked. "Oi, oi, you've got a bit of a walk ahead of ya. Where are you coming from anyway?" The driver of the small farming lorry was a ruddy-faced gent of indeterminate age, though James guessed it at somewhere around 45, with a not unkindly lilt to his voice. In his best working-class Scots, James replied, "Hey, you said a mouthful." James needed the man to think that he belonged. Filling in unnecessary details wouldn't help with that impression. He turned and looked down the road, giving the air of casually listening to birdsong. The farmer, looking in the same direction, leaned out the window. "Rush," he announced. "Get them up in Scotland, do you, lad?" James grinned, disarmingly. "Hey, we've also got robins, unicorns, and a few dragons, not to mention a handful of kelpies and selkies." The farmer chuckled softly, then turned and fixed James with hooded eyes. After a long moment, he said, "I'm going as far as the Carshalton Road in Sutton." James wasn't sure if this was an invitation and didn't wish to presume. While he prevaricated, though, the man dispelled his doubts. "Are you coming or going? 'Cause if you're coming, you best jump in, 'cause I'm going." James was on tenterhooks for the first couple of miles. He had put the suitcase at his feet, feigning carefreeness, despite the delicate cargo and the penalty for being caught with such a thing. Clyde, however, didn't seem too interested in anything but whether England would play Scotland after the war was over and who would be in goal. "Currently, you can't argue with your man Dawson, but I do like Willie Waugh for your lot, mainly because of his name." "Can you imagine him being in goal and a whole stadium of England fans chanting his name? Poor bugger." James chuckled despite having very little idea who Willie Waugh was. As part of his cover, he'd memorized the England players, as well as his team's lineup, Arsenal. But here, now, confronted with a proper football fan waxing lyrical about a match between his country's team and England, his confidence thinned. Trouble was, his country was entirely alien to him. He'd heard stories, of course, from Jean and Douglas, but they'd only holidayed in England briefly, never in Scotland, and they'd barely driven north of London. Home base had been a flat in Belgravia, though James couldn't recall if the Abernethys had owned it, if it had been a diplomatic service perk, or if someone had loaned it to them, while the bulk of their trip had been spent in Cornwall. And then, just like that, he was saved. He heard Clyde laughing, his eyes snapped open, his head coming up off his chest simultaneously, causing a sharp pain that he knew he was going to pay for later. "That boring, am I?" Clyde laughed again. "Yeah, I reckon I am at that. Sam, my wife, Samantha, says I could bore the paint off a barn." He handed him a bundle, which turned out to be a balled-up sweater. "Here, put that behind your head and nod off. I'll give you a poke when we're in Sutton." James wasn't sure if he could sleep, but faking it would give him a break from having to pretend to be football savvy. Much obliged. I haven't slept much in the past few days." "None of us have, mate. None of us have. The blighters may be bombing London proper for the most part, but we hear him coming and going almost every night. Dogs get to barking, cattle are disturbed, lost an half-dozen of me best woolies to fry. And I could swear the cow's milk has a different taste, sort of sour and metallic, you know." But James didn't know. He didn't know much of anything until he was poked into a state of hyper-alertness what felt like a few seconds later. "Carshalton Road coming up." James blinked, pulled back the sleeve of his coat and squinted at his watch. He'd been out for a good 50 minutes, if not longer. He pulled the sweater from behind his head, gave it a shake and a fold, put it back on the seat between himself and the farmer. "Thanks for that." Clyde grunted appreciatively. James massaged his neck where he'd cricked it earlier, rotating it slowly as he went. He took a deep breath, cleared his throat. By now there was a fair amount of light in the sky. Though sunrise was still a little ways off, and in front of them James could see multiple plumes of smoke. The wind was blowing from that direction, filling the air with an acrid haze that burned the eyes and pricked the back of the throat. "Dock fire," grumbled Clyde, reading his thoughts. "Bloody Huns." James glanced over at the man. He looked about the right age. "Were you over there?" Clyde grunted and sniffed, steeling his nerve. Finally, clearing his throat with a grumbling cough, he answered, "Bastards." Arrived in France, part of the 168th 2nd London Brigade in midwinter of 16. First action, some ruddy place called the Gomcourt Salient. Don't ask me where it was, because I scrubbed it from me memory, see? We lost 5,000 men. I was one of them and all. Except some bloody clever doctor brought me back to life. Shot through the bleeding lung I was. Should have left me there. He went on quieter. With the rest of them. He coughed once more, but caught himself. He smacked the steering wheel with his palm. Now that won't do. Getting all bleeding maudlin and the sun's barely up. Anyway, it was the first day of the Somme. Historical day. Historical battle and all that. I was probably lucky, because the Somme went on forever. And everyone who did come back, came back fucked. Fucked in the bloody head. Shot a bullet through the lung, losing all me mates, dying for half an hour. Small price to pay for having all me marbles, wouldn't you say? James didn't quite know what to say, but he answered in the affirmative nonetheless. I'd say. The man's story, short on detail though it may have been, had punched him in whatever passed for a heart. There was a lump in his throat and his eyes felt the way they had whenever the nuns had gone too far with their punishment. But there was no room for elaboration or empathy that morning. They were at his jumping-off spot. It was time to take his leave of the farmer. As he got out of the small lorry, he turned back to Clyde. "I hope you don't lose anyone in this war." "Too late. Son was taken at Dunkirk. Got a daughter, Elizabeth, working for the WAFs. She's safe enough, I reckon. Safe as any of us are." It was delivered so matter-of-factly that James was out of the vehicle and waving goodbye before he fully registered that the man had already lost half of his children to Hitler's war.